So many fences, we parted cats and we damage it. The class is on a contract, we terrorize only amateurs. This is the path of a pathological gassy rapper taken from the...
Gora, welcome to Cape Town.
Thank you, Batamba.
How's your trip to Cape Town so far?
So far, so good. It's a lovely place to be. Very different from Johannesburg. I feel there's almost a calm. If you have to compare it to Johannesburg, no, so far, so good. I'm loving it here.
More calm than Johannesburg?
More calm. Johannesburg is quite crazy, but this time of the year, I must say, Johannesburg is not so bad. But I like it here in Cape Town. Maybe, who knows, one day, this could be my home.
And I know you're a big fan of Maradona. And Argentina just won the World Cup. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so I think I discovered real football when I discovered Maradona. Maradona, for me personally, perhaps the greatest player ever. But then I'm very biased. I'm also a big Argentina fan. So it was a double bonus.
Yeah.
I like Messi. Messi is a great player. But not quite Maradona. Maradona could do things that were unbelievable. I mean, it was almost magical what he could do with the ball. Some people would say Messi too, but not with the elan or the finesse of a Diego Maradona. Messi it's just two different types of footballers. One is a street footballer, which I identify with, and one was made in the academies. So Maradona always for me. And I love Argentina, so I had a very good World Cup.
So no need. And my next question was going to be between Messi versus Ronaldo. So obviously...
Between Messi and... Yeah, I think they're two very different types of players. If you have to compare them according to the stats, there's not very much difference between them. Two of them are both goal machines. But now in this World Cup, you would have seen the versatility of a Messi, for example. He was able to change his game, drop deeper, get others to play for him, whereas Ronaldo was more limited to the striking role. And for a role like that, you need to have your pace. You need to do things like you could do when you were very young. Ronaldo had to adapt his game. He couldn't. Messi was able to. And of course, Argentina became world champions. Personally, I think in terms of personnel players, Portugal had a better team.
Okay.
Portugal should have done better. Unfortunately, it would have just meant that Ronaldo would have had to adapt his game, but he couldn't.
Which he couldn't quite do for this World Cup.
Which he didn't want to. I think he sees the glory in playing the position that he is, and he is not the beast that he used to be 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
He's not the finisher that he was. Maybe he has that hunger. But things have changed. I think he's been worked out by the younger players.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but the whole time when I was watching the World Cup, and I felt a bit bad that South Africa is not represented. What do you think the problem is?
So South Africa has got lots of problems. And the problems with South African football is now all over. Everyone knows about it. It is especially frustrating for us, those who love football, those who understand football, that we can't put together a coherent plan. Every time we plan for 4 years. But you don't plan for 4 years. It has to be a longer this thing. Here, Danny Jordan say the other day that we'll give the new coach all the resources, everything that he requires, so that we can compete in 2026. But that shouldn't be. Your team should have already been sorted out now. For example, if you take the Belgian team, and I know they haven't done well, but the Belgian team for 2026 is already been sorted out. In terms of continuity, in terms of building, it's already, the next generation is ready to step foot. Now we need to start building for 2026. It just shows that there's very little thought that goes into it, and those that know how to run football somehow are not involved in the running of football. I don't see South Africa being involved in 2026. If they do, it will be fantastic. If they're starting to plan now for 2026, it might already be a little too late because the other countries already have a plan. It's sad for us. I wanted to go to the World Cup, this World Cup that have passed, but not having an identity, not having your own team there just takes away a lot from it. So I decided that I will wait till Bafana qualifies. I may be long dead when that happens.
So in terms of, I wouldn't say way forward, or what could be done to, from your point of view, what could be done to make sure that if not this World Cup, say in the following World Cup, 2030s?
So I think the 2026 is in the States, and then for 2030, it will be realistic to start planning for the 2030 World Cup right now. A lot of planning has to go into it. If we make it for 2026, I think we will need to have a certain element of luck, that things need to fall into place for us when we go into if we need to qualify. And we haven't had much luck. But if we want to qualify for 2030 World Cup, we can put things into place right now. And for things to be put into place, we need grassroots involvement. Identifying the areas that we need to get the right people involved throughout the country, not just in Johannesburg, not just here, just not in the air. We need to get coaches. We need to pay the ones at the bottom to identify the talent. We need to put structures in place. We need to have coaches that will go and find the talent, and then create these centers of excellence where we can get them like they do in Australia and different parts of the world, in the first world countries. So that takes a plan. And I'm just shooting off the hip right now because I haven't sat down and worked out what this plan should be like. Obviously, if I give it more thought, I could tell you exactly what needs to be done according to my perspective. But there's got to be planning, firstly, with the right people. And the right people, South Africa do have the right people. Unfortunately, they are being sidelined and they're being marginalized. I also feel that South Africa need to tap into the different demographics. Footballers have different personalities. It was always well known that in the past, in the black community, the players were extremely talented. We had our dribblers, we had really skillful flair players. The discipline in defense and so forth, the structure of the team came from the white community, for example. I don't speak much of Indians because we don't know much about Indians. Post 1994, not much has happened. The colored player is skillful and very, very balanced. So the colored and Indian player have the same personality. It's a pity that the teams that we put out does not reflect this demography of the team that, for example, won in 1996. There was Tovey, there was Mark Williams, I think there was Tinkler involved, Aronson. So when you look at the team right now, the Aronses of the world and the Tinklers and the Tovies have now fallen away. They are no more there, which is sad.
Yeah.
And so South Africa has become fairly one-dimensional, and I think this has to be once again placed at the door of SAFA. Instead of reacting and saying, why aren't there all of these things? They should be saying, what can we do to get these guys back involved?
Yeah.
Because they are involved. The whites watch British football. The Indians watch British football. They love football. And so what is it? Why are they not watching our local football? Why are they not involved? So these little things have to be done. We need to become a country once again. We cannot marginalize and think everything is gay. The greatest game in the world is football. It's played everywhere. Football dominates in 80% of the countries throughout the world. That's the main sport. It's no different in South Africa. I'm a teacher, so I teach children, and I have all types of children in my class, from all the demographics. You ask an Indian child, from the black child, from a colored child, or to the Indian, especially the boys, what would you like to be one day when you grow up? I'd like to be a soccer player. So the dreams at the lowest level is the same. What would you like to be? I'd like to be a Messi, Ronaldo. I'd like to be this. And they play the game at break time. They really get involved in it. But reality sort of happens when they're at the age of 12 or 13. Because now they need to go to high school. Now we're starting to plan for our future. And if you Indian, colored, or well, not so much colored, Indian and white, you know that there is no future for you in football. In South Africa. Because when you look, I'm looking at Bafana. If I'm an Indian person, who can I identify with there? Because you'll say, but we are all South African. It just doesn't work like that. Not in a school. Not. So where is Sulibamji? Where's Sirajapaz? Where's Booby, Solomons? Is there someone that I can identify with? So I speak to my dad and I say, Dad, I'd like to be. He says, no, son, you have no future in football. So concentrate on your studies and there's a future. So that boy stops playing 11 aside and then he plays 5 aside on a weekend or something like that, because that's his contact with football. He then supports Liverpool or Manchester United. His DSTV becomes an expert on overseas football. He cannot name any of our local players. He doesn't believe there's hope. And for those that are really good, that play they go overseas. And it's amazing that we don't know how many, but there are hundreds of boys playing in leagues overseas, not in the top leagues, but in the second division, third division, and they're making a living. And we don't even know who these boys are. And I'm not speaking of black players, I'm speaking of colored players, white boys, black players, all of them going and playing overseas. But these are all lost to this thing. So for the marginalized, when I say the marginalized, I mean that they have been marginalized by SAFA. The Indians and the whites, they don't feel that there is a future in football. So they go into business, they become doctors, they become this, they become lawyers, they become all sorts of things so that they can eke out a living in the country. And if there is involvement by an Indian or a white person in football, it's going to be as a physiotherapist, as a manager in management, because that's what they do well.
Goalkeeper coach
or something like that. And they'll do it at And even at the highest level, maybe they'll be a manager because that's the skills that they have, the skill set. But to be a player, I don't think we see the country now sees Indians as footballers.
Yeah.
Or we see white players. Okay, there's maybe a sprinkling of white players in the league in their PSL right now. Indians, there aren't any. Colored players are strong, but no, they don't. There's no future for them. So what can we do? I don't know, but I know Safa can do something about it. The mentality amongst parents is you have no future. Don't go there.
And then in terms of Indian players, is there a history of Indian players playing at the highest level in South Africa?
To my knowledge, I don't know of any. Let's take a place like Lenasia, right? Lenasia is very close to the place that I grew up in. So Lenasia is one of the biggest Indian towns. It was Indian, now it's predominantly Indian still. So Lenasia gave birth to teams like Swaraj. Okay, Swaraj started a little earlier in Vredendorp, and then there was Bluebells. These were the top two teams in Federation. And from there we had Louis Jivanitham, Prega Thundran, Ratan Padiachi, Terry Jivanitham, we had Alan Munsami. These were players that could have played for any of those things. So he was from Pretoria. Okay. So these players that I'm telling you right now, they were extremely talented. They were really talented, but they played in the Federation League. Bluebell Swaraj play, there may be 20, 30,000 people that's watching the game. You go to a place like Chatsworth, and there was Burria came from Chatsworth, and there were Verulam Suburbs had a team. Verulam had a team called Suburbs. There was Aces United. You go to Durban and you go to Curry's Fountain on a Saturday afternoon. If any one of these teams are playing against Cape Town Spurs or any one of them, there is no place to sit. It is packed to the rafters. That was Indians and coloreds, because that was how apartheid was extremely cruel. Yeah? There isn't that anymore. Since unification, there is no Manning Rangers anymore. They won the first PSL title. There's no Verulam Suburbs, there's no Burria, there's no Sundowns. Well, Sundowns have become the Sundowns, but they have their origins.
Original Sundowns.
The original Sundowns started in the Federation League. And then Zola Mahobe took them over, and then they became something else. For example, so all of these teams are all gone. Osman, Chelsea, all of them.
Dynamos.
If you go to and Dynamos too. Dynamos was one of the strongest teams in the federation, and then they also survived for a little while in the NSL. But if you go to Lenasia, the league stopped at under 14. After that, there's no football. Nobody plays football. The youngsters don't play. If you go to Chatsworth, I don't know what the status is, but because Lenasia is just down the road from me, there's no football. They just don't play it. They play 5-a-side or 6-a-side. It's an indictment on football. Just football. I don't like to use the word Indian and colored or whatever, because I never saw myself as that growing up. I always just wanted to play football. So, you know, my experience at Pirates was a very difficult experience. As in, I was signed as an Indian player I was signed as a player. But I was the only Indian. I think the only other Indian player that played, Dashi, was there for a couple of games, but Dashi was very much on the fringes. And then there was Rashid Khan, but Rashid Khan was part of the original non-racial Pirates team. I think it was in 1970. So they were, and then the authorities they just put a stop to that team. I think it was Gerrit van der Hart, Hans Moses, and Ralph Hendricks with Najomo, with Skara Sono? Skara Sono played there, and Tebza Molloy's father, Chippa Molloy, played in that team. That was a great team, but it was shut down by the authorities because it was a non-racial team playing in different parts of the country and attracting a non-racial thing. So they broke their team up. They made Pirates a black team. They made these the other teams white, and so, but those things are not like that anymore. So at Pirates, for someone like me in the early 1990s, I had to prove myself at every game, and I know nobody said it, but it was because I was Indian. Every game was a challenge.
Yeah.
Whether we won the Iwisa, whether we won the PP Top 8, whether this, every game. And it's impossible to be at the top of your game every game, because at some point you're going to drop the ball. But if someone is just waiting for you to drop the ball so that they can drop you, it creates a lot of pressure on you. So I had that experience at Pirates. I always knew and I tried to become part of them. I tried to shave my hair, tried to learn the language. But I've learned that through a language, you can discriminate against someone by the use of your language. You hear? Okay. And you can use language to discriminate against someone. I didn't know that at the time. I'm learning about it now, and I hear that Paul Adams, his experience when they were calling him names.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Brown shite in the ring or something like that, you know. But they used their class to discriminate against this guy, and all he wanted to do was to be a part of them. And I think about my experience with Pirates. All I want to do is be part of the team, and they kept on pushing away. And eventually you say, look, I'm not wanted here, which is unfortunate.
Was that
Pirates have never had or Chiefs, or never had an Indian player again in this thing, and I don't think they're going to have one anytime soon. We don't trust them as players right now. We don't trust them to make the environment conducive for us. I needed to pray on a Friday if we're going. They didn't know about my religion. They didn't know about my diet. They didn't know about anything. And the more you just keep on giving up things to be part of it, and they just don't care, and they just keep on. But yet, we're in a place right now where we want others to think about us as the dominant, as black people, that people are not looking after us. But it's the same. It works both ways. So you can't just take. At some point you need to give. So when I think about my experiences at Pirates with someone like Ivan, who was at the helm, I don't think they're going to change for anyone. That's who they are. That's the culture of the team. Will they change? Hopefully they will. But I won't bet against it.
So if you look at the game now, I want to compare the two eras of South African football, top flight. The era that you played in and the era now. Because right now, I believe it's a land of milk and honey in terms of like how players are treated, how players are remunerated. And then back in the day, tell us about the environment of professional football in your era.
So we were not professional football players in the sense of what they are right now. In fact, we were semi-professional. I was a school teacher. I went to school in the morning. I left at 4 o'clock, to go for training, or at least 3 o'clock, go for training, and 4 o'clock we start, 7 o'clock we done. That was 6 days a week. But during the week, I was a school teacher. Yeah. So lots of us had jobs and we played football as well. It was also a time when the money hadn't come into football yet. There were no agents, there were no people that came and looked after you. There was no medical aid, there wasn't anything. Like when I signed up for Pirates, I was also at Dynamos. I got a slight increase when I went to Pirates. But the only thing outside of my salary at Pirates was workman's compensation. I mean, I don't even know if that exists anymore. So they took 25 Rand off for workman's compensation in case something happens, and then you can claim.
Okay, yeah.
You know, something like that. So for a couple of thousand Rand a month, which was a lot of money at that time, but not really much to make a big difference in your life. That was the average salary of a teacher or a clerk or something like that at the time. But there was nobody to look after you in terms of agents, in case you got injured or anything like that. And the money hadn't come yet. Fast forward to where we are right now. You have someone that gets you a boot sponsor. You can have this depending on your portfolio or who you are. Yeah, the status of the player. You can get someone to really look after you. We just signed a little NSL form to say that we're playing for the year, and in the end of the year it would be renewed. And something like that. We had no say where we were going. The officials of the clubs controlled us like they owned us. They could tell us where to go, and we had no say in something like that. So football has changed. And then after 1993, when South Africa became a democracy and we were accepted by FIFA, that's when the money started coming in. Remember, before that, we were isolated. We were not part of FIFA. We were not part of everything. So once we became part of the world, the money started pouring in because the exposure to the different companies. And so teams like Pirates became more professional. They became more slick in the way they did things. Chiefs became better organized. Sundowns better organized, and the money, and they were able to attract the biggest sponsors, and their players were able to get the best paid. So the game has evolved from what it was to what it is right now. I mean, I hear some of them. The money is that some of the players are earning, and it's just mind-boggling. And I just hope those boys are looking after their money, because football has a time span. If you're earning a lot of money as a footballer, and the glamour that comes with it, and it's very easy to get caught up in the moment and say, you know what, and you forget that this is going to end in 4 or 5 years. 4 or 5 years, you think, I still have a lot of time. You know, God willing, nothing gets. But it's not a lot of time, especially if you spending money freely. But I do believe now that there's education, there's financial education that's been given to the players, so that they can think of a life beyond football. Many years ago, I was involved with an NGO where we did some teaching. I did some teaching, and we did life skills. We used to go to clubs, Chiefs, Pirates, Sundowns, and we do life skills coaching. And one of the things that we did, and I was part of the instructors, one of the things that we did was speak about retirement after. I want to tell you, that was World Cup 2009, towards the end, just before the World Cup. Not many were thinking retirement. And some of them were knocking on the door of retirement. And we speak of retirement annuities, we're speaking of all of these things to the players about investing. At least 40% of your salary invest, because you have enough to look after yourself. And they were just, no, why do we have to do this? And it's strange, the older players, those that were really coming to the end, guys like Andre Arendse and company, that were thinking, okay, listen, things are coming to an end very soon. We need to do something different. The younger players were not interested. So they need to be forced to not just buy that fancy car, but I'm hoping that it's happening right now. We didn't have that. Nobody told us about that. I'm one of the fortunate ones. I have a degree behind my name, so I can always make ends meet. I always have, not can make, I always have the opportunity to look after myself, because I can do things outside of football.
Yeah.
But many of them can't.
And then that's where, like you were saying earlier on, that there was no agents back then. That should be the role then of the agent nowadays. The agent nowadays should be able to sit down with the player and then have those conversations in terms of, okay, this is how we...
You know, Patanwa, before I speak about agents, I also want to speak about my privilege as an Indian player playing football at that time. I had an education. So I went to college, I got my qualification, and I played football. The black players didn't have that. So for a lot of them, even though they were, especially those that did really well, we're speaking about the Nick Seshwenis and the Tso Makanyas, those that spoke to everything that resembled Pirates. And those were the Pirates boys, Bashin Mashlangu and company. Even though they were idolized and given money, they didn't have anything to fall back on. So in many ways, I had that privilege of being able to fall back on my teaching degree. The white boys too, the white players. I mustn't sound like I'm condescending when I say white boys. I just mean the white players. They had a plan B. If they don't make it in football, they could walk into a job because they had a good education. And that time, of course, you know, it's still, if you're white, you are very employable. White male, you know, you're employable pretty much elsewhere, anywhere, as compared to Indian male, colored male, and then black male. So it was very, very different there. I had that privilege. So a lot of the players right now that are suffering, the ex-players, are the black players. Because our system was designed to keep the black man back. Are they being looked after now, the players? I'm hoping they do, because that will be the duty of an agent, to give them sound financial advice.
Our education system should also play a role in terms of educating players compared to the education system back then under apartheid.
I'm hoping that I'd like to believe that the education system that is being meted out to our people at the moment can give them an edge, can make it better.
Yeah.
But our education too is in a crisis. When you think of you need 33% to pass or something like that, when you bring down standards, it just means that the system is failing.
Yeah.
Because the standards are dropping, because we can't get to 50, so we're going to drop it to 33, and to make sure that when we're standing there and we're saying the pass rate is so much, and we can give the right figures and we can give hope to the people. But it's a shambles, like how a lot of the things is, and perhaps the biggest indictment in the country to the poorest of the poor is the failing education system. Unfortunately, in education, my wife is in a public school. I hear about it all of the time. I have not experienced that. I am in a private school where everything works, where everything is just run properly. It is extremely sad that it has to be like this. I know those boys, funny enough, the professional footballers are not going to come out from schools like mine. It's going to come out from the poorest of the poor schools. That's where the best talent comes out. Will they have the skills and the education to know? I don't know. They will need some help.
Okay. So I believe you've been working on a book that you want to publish in terms of your career.
So yeah, so my book is also speaks of life lessons, not only from the soccer field, but about life. I grew up in a little town in Vereeniging in south of Johannesburg, maybe an hour out of Johannesburg, and I grew up in the heart of the apartheid times. So at a time when the country was very, very different. And in my book, I speak about my love for football, my love for education. And as I traveled from Vereeniging through to Johannesburg, and my life changes, and all the time it's football and soccer, and they sort of crisscross. And about the people that come into my life and help me along all of the time. How I end up at Pirates, and how I end up at one of the top private schools in Johannesburg at Bolu. And all the while, meeting wonderful people along the way. But my book is just generally about people. People that have come and held me and picked me up and taken me to a new level, a new stage. That's basically what it's all about, but it has some very interesting stories there about people. There's some controversy. I have a comment about education, or an opinion about football, about politics, about life. So some people are not going to like it. I even have an opinion about religion, and how we see religion, and how we can sometimes take God and try to place God into a little box and believe God is just there to look after us, that look like us and do certain things. So not everyone's going to like it, but then hopefully if they don't like it, they would have read it.
Yeah. if there was a lamp with a genie, without that lamp,
so
to be the future of South African football.
That's a question a lot of us are mulling over, right? So we're thinking, lots of people are thinking that, but we don't have the will to do anything about it. And I think a lot of that is going to depend on SAFA. If SAFA has the will to change, I think they can change things. So in my mind's eye, if I want to see where we want to go and going forward, I envision that we strengthen school football at grassroots level, from little ones. We strengthen schools football throughout, that we get ordinary people to scout on a little stipend, to go out and look for the best talent throughout the country, or in the areas where there's a lot of football taking place. So we scout the best talent. I envisage that performance centers being set up in our different provinces, high performance centers where we can get get the best, that I envisage that we can get at these centers, that we can have housing, or we can have lodges for these kids to lodge, to stay there, have education centers for these kids. But maybe 3-4 of these centers in every province in the country, that the best of all the best, by the time they under 16, they would have played in China, they would have played in Asia, they would have played in Africa, they've played in Europe, and they've been exposed to all the different types of football, that we know exactly who these players are. That for me is the future, that we have more local coaches. Because the last 4 teams at the World Cup were all local coaches. So spending a lot of money on education of coaches. If we have these things in place, there is no country in Africa firstly. There'll be very few countries in the world that will be able to stand up with South Africa, because we have such natural talent. We have gifted athletes here.